Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first story is titled, I Have to Pay to Print Personal Stuff at Work? So do you, boss. Many years ago, I worked for an organization providing frontline customer service. It was a decent place to work, but our manager had lots of rules. One of the rules was that we could not do any personal printing with the printers at work. If we did, we were expected to pay 50 cents per page for black and white printing and $1 per page for color. I'm not sure who made this rule, but the manager was constantly reminding us. Our desks were not assigned, meaning any day you could be sitting at any desk depending on your assigned tasks for the day. One day I was interviewing for another job within the organization, but at another location. Prior to the interview, the manager of the other location asked me if I'd mind printing a copy of my resume and bringing it with me as their printers were down for the day. I said no problem, and figured I'd print it at work since it was work-related. I was sitting at a desk that did not have a printer at it. The closest printer was located between my manager's desk and an employee desk. So, I printed it and stood up to go get it. Before I go to the printer, my manager got there first. My print job went ahead of hers. When she saw what I had printed, she said, OP, this looks like a personal print job. I explained it wasn't, but she disagreed and said since it had nothing to do with our day-to-day work, I had to pay $2 for 4 black and white pages. I begrudgingly paid up. I asked her what happened to the money, and she said she always put it in the Christmas party fund. Alright. A few weeks later, I was sitting at the desk with the printer at it. It was lunchtime, and everyone except my manager agreed to go to a nearby restaurant for lunch. I had walked out our building and realized I forgot my wallet. So, I quickly ran back in to get it. When I go to my desk, I could hear the printer going. I was curious what was being printed as it was spitting out page after page. I quickly glanced at the pile and saw at least 100 pages printed in color, announcing a Sweet 16 for Trista, our manager's daughter. It very obviously belonged to my manager. My manager came out of the bathroom a moment later and seemed shocked to see me standing there. I picked up the pile and passed it to her and told her our Christmas party fund was going to be getting a big boost. She said nothing but looked really uncomfortable. A few weeks later, our district manager made his quarterly visit. He talked about the upcoming Christmas party and how excited he was for it. I decided it was time for some petty revenge. I raised my hand and said, just wondering how much we've accumulated this year for the Christmas party from print jobs? He looked so confused and asked me to explain what I meant. So I told him our manager's rule. He got really quiet and said he'd have to review this. The next day, my manager sent an email saying the printing rule was something she was misinformed on and would be abolished immediately. Me, being the little crap disturber I am, hit reply all and asked what would happen to the already accumulated funds. Someone else said we should have a nice healthy fund for a pizza lunch, and everyone agreed. The next day, I hear my manager ordering 10 pizzas for lunch. Also used her own personal credit card to pay for it all. Do I think she was pocketing the printing money all along? Absolutely. But it was fun making her sweat and then having to spend nearly $300 the next day to make up for it. The next story is titled, HOA towed and destroyed my truck, leading to a near bankruptcy of the HOA through legal action. From the time I was old enough to appreciate the sleek lines and intricate machinery of a well-made car, I was hooked. I spent hours poring over books about classic cars and vintage models, dreaming about the day when I would have my own collection of vehicles to tinker with and customize. Even as I grew older, my love for cars never faded, and I continued to spend my free time scouring junkyards and garage sales for rare finds and diamond-in-the-rough projects to work on. When I finally had the opportunity to move to a new neighborhood with a spacious garage, I was over the moon. This was the chance I had been waiting for. A place where I could finally indulge my passion for cars and start working on my own projects in earnest. I had a few classic cars in mind that I wanted to restore, including a vintage truck that I had been eyeing for years. However, it quickly became clear that my enthusiasm for car restoration was not shared by the homeowners association in my new neighborhood. They had a very specific vision of what the neighborhood should look like, and it did not include the sight of an old rusted truck parked in someone's driveway. At first, I tried to comply with their rules, moving my truck in and out of the garage at night to avoid drawing attention, but it wasn't long before the HOA started to take notice of my activities. One day, I woke up to find that my truck was gone. At first, I thought it had been stolen, but then I discovered that it had been towed away by the HOA. I was furious. How could they just take my truck like that without even giving me a chance to explain myself? I went to the HOA to demand an explanation, but they simply told me that they had the right to remove any vehicles that didn't meet their standards. I tried to argue with them, but it was no use. They had already crushed my truck, leaving me with nothing but a pile of scrap metal. I was devastated, but I knew I couldn't let the HOA get away with this. I decided to take matters into my own hands and seek revenge. I started to collect old, broken-down trucks from junkyards and abandoned lots, and I strategically placed them along the street in front of my house. But I didn't just leave them there. I made sure to disable the tow hook contact points on each truck, making it nearly impossible for the HOA to remove them. Every time they tried to tow one of the trucks away, it cost them a fortune in fees and special equipment. It wasn't long before the HOA was struggling financially, and they couldn't keep up with the costs of towing away my junk vehicles. They tried to raise HOA fees to cover the costs, but the homeowners in the neighborhood rebelled. They were tired of the HOA's rules and regulations, and they weren't going to take it anymore. They demanded that the HOA pay for the cost of towing the trucks themselves, and the HOA had no choice but to comply. But the story doesn't end there. As it turned out, some of the people on the board of the HOA had been skimming money off the top for years, using it to fund their own personal projects and lavish lifestyles. Once they had to start paying for the cost of towing the trucks themselves, they quickly realized that they were in over their heads. The scandal rocked the neighborhood and the HOA was forced to step down. They were replaced by a new board, one that was much more lenient and understanding of the residents' needs and desires. I was vindicated and I felt like justice had been served. Today, I'm still happily working on my new truck in my garage. But I'm not the only one. Thanks to the charges brought about by the new HOA board, more and more of my neighbors are starting to embrace their own passions and hobbies, whether it's gardening, painting, or even car restoration like me. There's a sense of community in our neighborhood that wasn't there before. We have block parties and potlucks, and everyone is much more relaxed and friendly. Instead of constantly worrying about breaking HOA rules, we can focus on living our lives and enjoying the things we love. As for me, I'm working on a new project now, a vintage muscle car that I hope to have up and running by the end of the year. I don't have to worry about the HOA anymore, and I can focus on doing what I love. But there's one more twist to this story. Recently, I received a letter in the mail from the former head of the HOA. In it, he apologized for what had happened and he offered to pay for the cost of my crushed truck. He explained that he had been going through a tough time in his personal life and he had taken it out on me and my beloved vehicle. At first, I was skeptical. How could he have changed so much in such a short amount of time? But then I met with him in person, and I could tell that he was sincere. He had lost everything in the fallout from the HOA scandal, and he was trying to make amends. In the end, I decided to accept his offer. It wasn't about the money, but about forgiveness and closure. We shook hands, and I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Sometimes, the most unexpected things can happen in life. But if you stay true to your passions and your values, everything will work out in the end. That's the lesson I've learned from my experience with the HOA, and it's one that I'll never forget. The next story is titled Sister-in-Law and the Honeymoon. I was asked to create a post about this from some users. Recap, Jim and Kathy got married in June. Kathy and my mother-in-law, we'll call her Coral, called me to ask for my husband and I to pay for their honeymoon, which was $5,600. Why? Because we could afford it. I said no and was told I was ruining her vision of her day, and I hung up. The wedding came with some very bumpy parts, but they did get married. Yay! Kathy berated everyone who did not give money or buy from her registry during the reception. We left shortly after her crying/berating everyone. I was so pissed I couldn't think straight. Not once did she say, "Thank you for traveling to see this," or "Thank you for accommodating to my crazy behavior." My husband mentioned in the car on the way to the airport that Coral pulled him aside and asked if he could help fix their honeymoon situation. Since they had no backup, they were just going to go home and pout. My husband, Tim, said, "Sure, I'll talk to OP and we can maybe have them come down for a visit. We live near the beach, we'll have nice weather, and plenty to do." Coral proceeds to pull Kathy over and said, "Tim and OP have invited you and Jim for a week visit. How fun is that?" Kathy then proceeded to give Tim a hug and said they would be in touch tomorrow to finalize plans. Tim said, "Well, I need to run things by OP as she is a teacher and has to go back to work soon. So we'll let you know if that works." Coral said, "Oh, I'm sure OP won't mind, Tim. Let me handle that." Good lord was I mad when I heard that this was all planned even before I had heard about it. So, in the end, I thought this was a peace offering for Kathy and I to get along. Maybe I had been unfair to her. I don't know. Once we got back, we scheduled for them to arrive on June 25th, a week after they married. We found cheap tickets through Frontier. Yay, even better, it was a direct flight. We bought a new bed, as the other was a futon. New sheets, I bought a few items to put in a welcome package, toothbrushes, snacks, etc. I bought them new towels and gave them the kids' bathroom, cleaned up and down the house. The day they arrived, the first thing I heard was, "Why Frontier? They're horrible, OP. I'll never fly with them again. Try to go with American Airlines next time." I let that go, but I could see this trip was not going to change my opinion of her. She asked what was for dinner, as she wanted to go out. Now, my daughter has celiac disease, so she cannot have gluten, and it makes it hard to go out. She stated, "Then cook her food and bring it." I chose to make a barbecue bowl instead. Everyone else loved it, besides Kathy. She didn't eat, only opened my expensive wine and poured a glass. When Tim mentioned, "That's OP's really nice wine, could you get a glass from another one?" she proceeded to pour the wine back in the bottle. That she drank from. I also found her rummaging through our pantry eating snacks since she didn't have dinner. She ate around 5 protein bars my hubby uses for weightlifting. I was told by my kids she spilt Coke down our couch on accident and wiped it up with our blanket. We have nice hardwood floors, so of course they were sticky. Left Coke bottles spread throughout the house, took all the items I bought for the welcome package home, even though she didn't use them. We went to the beach. We live near the Carolina coast, so we traveled in my hubby's truck. The 2-hour drive was too much on her back. She is a bigger girl, probably around 260, and then asked for my son to switch with her. I said, no. He needs to sit in the middle of the front because he was old enough and could fit. How was she going to fit? By having both of us in the back seat with him on my lap. Ha! She pouted the entire time and ate candy/snacks while smacking her mouth noisily. She then proceeded, once we got to the beach, to whine about no one applying sunscreen to her. I said I was putting it on my kids first, and she could ask her husband, as my kiddos were excited to start swimming in the ocean. She apparently never did, because she developed a horrible sunburn. Now, all of us got a little sun, we were there for hours, but Kathy was obviously in pain by the time we got back to the truck. Once we got home, she took a shower, grabbed some Gatorade, and went upstairs. They were leaving the next day, so I mentioned to Jim, "Wash anything you want. Just try to shake out the sand before putting it in the washer." Well, after tending to my family, I realized Kathy was doing laundry. I didn't think twice because maybe she was uncomfortable with Jim touching her clothes. The next day as they were leaving, Jim comes to me and says, there was a little accident in the bed. I said, no problem, I was going to clean them anyways. I thought it was her period by the way he was talking. I know how embarrassing that can be, and I would just throw away the sheets. No, there was poop on the duvet. Sand all over the floor, in the bathroom, and a dirty razor with pubes left in the shower. I was steaming pissed. So I start scrubbing everything, threw away the duvet, and when I was done, I went to start the laundry, only to find out that she didn't shake out any sand. She washed and dried clothes full of sand, broke both my washer and dryer, had to have them both replaced. She never did say thank you as well. The last story is titled, My Friend's Mom Pushed Me into a Table Saw. My friend Kylan and I work in a woodworking company. It's a pretty great job for me as I love hands-on activity and creating things. Kylan, however, has more of a difficult time with it all, which is completely fine as I help him with it. His mom and my mom aren't necessarily close, but both support me and him in our work. We're pretty young, so it helps with reassurance. But a few days before this incident, I started to realize that Kylan's mom never really acknowledged my work. Now that's not really a big deal to me as I don't require praise, but I do find it a bit weird as Kai's mom has apparently had a few racial incidents at her own work and I'm African. I was just assuming it's because she's afraid. I'm a pretty built guy and 6'6". Fast forward to Tuesday and I'm working on a wooden chair that has taken me a few more attempts than wanted. The table saw I had been using to make clean cuts was pretty rusty from Kai using it constantly. I headed out to the department to get a replacement and was a bit annoyed with Kai not doing it himself. I came back and said, hey man, don't be afraid to change your equipment. And he rolled his eyes and just replied with a K, which just annoyed me even more. I just pushed past it and continued. But minutes later, I heard Kai laughing and I looked up to find him laughing at my cutting. This made me extremely upset as I've been working almost day and night while he only works 7 to 9 hours. This along with his mom recently coming into shop and laughing along with him. This got to me, and I walked over to Kai and told him a few words that I shouldn't have. He immediately got defensive and pushed me back, and I was about to strike back when his mom instantly joined in with him and intentionally pushed me to the left where the saw was. Stupidly, I left it on. As soon as I was pushed back, the back of my hand was shoved right into the saw, causing a drizzle of blood to just gush everywhere, and for my palm to be basically split in half with a huge gap between my pinky and ring finger. The shock kicked in, and I instantly grabbed my hand and shouted for my mom, who was on the other side of the shop. She immediately got an ambulance and I was sent to the closest hospital. Kai has been texting me almost every day apologizing for his mother. The only text from her was her saying that this was my fault and to not hurt her son. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.